Brad is a high school English teacher who has been inspired to write young adult fantasy through his countless hours of teaching and reading to students. He is an avid follower of things mythological. When not writing, Brad spends his time in the outdoors, either on his bicycle or motorcycle touring the stunning countryside near his home. Brad is currently working on a book 3 in the ZEKE Proper Chronicles, The Gates of Asgard, due out in summer of 2013. Please welcome Brad Cameron.
Thank you very much. He kind of stole my thunder because I was going to tell you I was a teacher. I didn't think he was going to tell you that first. But that's what I do, and that's my day job. So I'm a teacher, and not too long ago I was told by a student of mine that for some reason, some comment I had made while I was teaching poetry is that I don't like Irishmen for some reason. I was told that, and I said, that is not true. That is not true at all. And I said, as a matter of fact, I have a really good joke about an Irishman. And it's the world's shortest joke. And it goes like this. An Irishman walks out of a bar. But I will say that having had the experience of being able to teach high school, now middle school, that has been my inspiration as far as my writing goes. And it was not too long ago that I was put in a position, about 5, 6, 7 years ago, I was put in a position by my department chair who said, Brad, you're going to teach, by the way, this semester mythology. And I said, okay, yeah, no problem. And then as soon as she left, I went in and I sat down and started crying, and I looked at this other teacher and I said, mythology's Zeus, right? Isn't that what it is? Because I didn't really care about it. I got into it, I started listening, reading up on it, learning about it, and then I discovered the Norse mythology, and that was the vehicle that I used to be able to tell my stories, which are the ZEKE Proper Chronicles, and which I have book 1 and book 2 in now at this point. So ZEKE is my main character, and ZEKE he follows, if you're familiar with it, he follows the hero's quest, and the hero's quest it's sort of a formula. If you know Harry Potter, if you know Star Wars and Luke Skywalker, each of these heroes, Lord of the Rings, okay, they follow a hero's type of quest, and they all have a lot of things in common. But the first thing I want to do is introduce to you my main character, and that is ZEKE. And I pride myself a little bit in the fact that I really like to use descriptive language so that you as a reader can really visualize what's happening, who is what the scene looks like, what the room looks like, everything. I think that's really important. So let me just start off reading for you the introduction of ZEKE. A late summer dusk was beginning to settle over the town, its purple hue accentuated by the fading orange of the falling sun cast a shadow of indifference. ZEKE looked around his room as the light began to fade. He was quite satisfied with the way his room was set up. He'd been working all afternoon, putting together his bed, sliding his dresser and desk in place, hanging up his clothes, and putting his personal items in order. He moved quietly over to the closet where a full-length mirror hung on the inside of the door. When ZEKE pulled the door open, a loud squeak emanated from its rusted hinges. ZEKE looked at himself in the reflection of the mirror, noticing that his jeans and t-shirt were smudged with dirt from the day's work of moving. He noted, too, that his normally tight, curly red hair hung down slightly over his piercing blue eyes, making him look even more disheveled, though the freckles crossing over his nose still seemed to gleam with the radiance of youth and vitality. The running he had been doing while training for his middle school's cross-country team had allowed him to have a lean, healthy appearance. His skin was slightly tanned from his many hours spent outside, and his eyes reflected a certain self-confidence that absorbed and hid any kind of arrogance. The next character I wanted to introduce, and this, again, this follows the hero's quest idea, is each hero has a mentor, somebody that gives them ideas, gives them tools, magic, whatever you will, to help them in their quest. In this case, the mentor is a character by the name of the Captain, or Bartholomew Gunner. And let me just introduce him just very quickly to you, and then I'm going to read some stuff that he says. From the kitchen, the mean-looking cook lumbered up to the counter. When Zeke saw him up close, he gasped inwardly. For one thing, he had never seen a man with that big of a head before. It's enormous, Zeke thought. I don't think they make hats that big. The man's head was shaved completely bald. His face was already covered in what appeared to be a 5 o'clock shadow, even though he had shaved just that morning. His mouth was turned down into a permanent frown, and his chin, well, he didn't really have a chin, just an enormous head going directly into a neck. His shirt sleeves were rolled up his large muscular arms to just below his elbows, where a colorful tattoo of a large eel wrapped around an anchor rested tamely on his hairy forearm. The collar of his shirt was deeply stained. As for the pattern on his shirt, Zeke wasn't sure if it was supposed to be there or if it had been splattered there from some kitchen malfunction. The man wore an apron that covered his substantial belly. It, too, was stained with all manner of food and grease. When he spoke, his voice was deep and gravelly, like someone who had smoked a tobacco pipe for most of their life. In addition, when he addressed the trio, he sounded, at least Zeke thought, like a pirate from one of those famous swashbuckler movies. Okay, so going now into Book 2, The Serpent Ship. At this point, things are, you'll learn a lot about, what's going on and what's sort of affecting the town. The captain has to train Zeke at this point to teach him, this is what the Norse myths tell us. This is what it's all about. These are the gods. These are the people that you need to be aware of. And so he begins to teach him and some others, this is what's going on. These are who these people are. And I'm going to try the voice, so forgive me if I don't do it. I'll try. The captain pulled over a stiff, oversized chair from the corner of the room, dragging it roughly over the thinly carpeted floor, setting it in place and sitting heavily, creaks and groans emanating from both him and the chair. He looked up slowly and began to speak. At first there was Odin. Well, he said, correcting himself. Technically, he wasn't the very first, but he was the firstborn of the frost giants. But I won't go into that. We'd be here forever if I do. Odin was the main god, the one who guided and led the rest. He is known by many names, Father of Thor, the first and foremost of the Aesir, the most powerful of the gods. He is god of poetry, battle, and death. He is known also as All-Father, the terrible one, one-eyed, and the leader of souls. But none of that really matters. What matters is that he was the one in charge. It was his job to protect humankind and to keep evil, like Loki, from infecting man. There are several realms, he continued, taking a moment to jot down an unfamiliar word on the top of the paper, that northern people believe exists. Here, he said, pointing and circling the word he'd written. Above all else is the realm of the gods themselves. Asgard is its name. It is here that the 12 divine gods and the 12 divine goddesses live. They control all, at least for now. Down here, he said, writing a new word in the bottom of the page, is Niflheim, the world of the dead. Hell, in other words. Daughter of the evil Loki oversees it. It is her job to look after the dead, all those of the 9 worlds who die of illness or old age. It is a place of darkness and despair. Over here is Jotunheim. Again, he wrote out the strange word on one side of the page. It is home to the giants, a hostile group of ruffians who have now joined with Loki and will continue with him throughout Ragnarok. More will join him, I fear, as the ship that sits in the cave continues its preparations. But here, he said, writing on another word, in bold black letters, in the very center of the page, is Midgard. It is home to man. In other words, Earth, where we live now. There are other worlds as well, 9 in all, as I've mentioned, but the ones that I've written here are most important. Okay, so after he teaches Zeke a little bit, mentors him, gets him involved in it and knowing exactly what he's up against, Zeke then discovers a lot of stuff about himself, as a hero does. He discovers his flaws, he discovers his strengths. One of the strengths that Zeke discovers he has is the ability to slip into something called the mist and be able to travel from world to world. It's at this point that he discovers another helper, somebody who helps him slip into that mist. And this actually, when I started writing this, I was influenced a lot by my grandpa. My grandpa was my grandpa Rutherford, and he died several years ago. But I always remember my grandpa because there were many things about him. He smoked a tobacco pipe, and I remember that smell about him that he had. I remember very vividly and you can't do this anymore, but this was up in Canada. He would, in the fall, he'd rake up all the dead leaves and put them in a barrel and then burn them. You can't do that now, but and I remember that smell and the garden, all the refuse from the garden he'd put in there, and that would burn. And so when I wrote this, this helper, this Grandpa John that Zeke talks about, that this was my thought was, this is my Grandpa Rutherford that I was writing about. Zeke fought against the heaviness again, bringing his hands to his eyes to help pry them open. With this final effort, Zeke began to see some light, but only a fragment, like a soft illumination emanating from under a closed door in a darkened room. Then, shading his eyes from the brightness, Zeke was able to open them fully. The brilliance of the light made him squint. He sat up quickly, almost as if he had received a poultice of new strength, and saw standing before him the old man who had once before visited him in his dreams. "Grandpa John," Zeke said, an awkward smile draped across his face. He stood confidently now, holding out his arms, pulling his grandfather toward him in a full embrace. Zeke stood for what seemed like a very long time, holding on to his grandfather. John Proper returned the embrace with enthusiasm as he wrapped his arms around his grandson's narrow waist. Zeke, his eyes closed against the tears that began to force their way through his lids, breathed in the old man's scent. As he did, Zeke began to see images form in his mind, images of freshly turned gardens with rich black dirt, the calm of the open ocean, the smoke of autumn leaves burning in an old barrel, and of toiling in the backyard and on the sea. He saw the sowing of seeds, the netting of fish, the harvest of fresh vegetables, helping a neighbor rake the full fall leaves, and nights beside a soft fire with a book, a loving companion, and calloused hands entwined. This, Zeke realized, was the true scent of his grandfather, the genuine essence of John Proper. So that was just a quick introduction for you of my two books. Book 3, the book of the Gates of Asgard, I'm well underway. I'm working hard on it, and should be out this summer, in early summer. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll be here with my books, and Tina's got them, and if you'd like a copy, I've got them for you. Thank you.